So last night was another really chilly night. High 20s per the forecast I could see, which normally isn't that big of a deal. I have a 10-degree bag with me. I've got plenty of layers. Should have brought my down pants. But the thing is, the ground's frozen, and that orange switchback that I use, the sleeping pad, works fine, but at some point you start to feel the cold come up, and I'm basically hitting that. That's what I get. I should have brought one of my air mattresses. I literally had every layer on last night, including my rain jacket and my wind pants. And I normally don't sleep on this unless I really have to. Some promising news, at least. As I mentioned, I've been having some circulatory issues post-COVID noro thing on the CDT. Still working with the doctor over some weird blood tests, stuff like that. But at least so far, it seems to be more with my feet than with my hands, which is a little bit of a relief. My hands are maybe a little more sensitive to cold, but not nearly as bad as my feet were. If you watch the Swanee thing, I had a hell of a time keeping my feet warm there. So I've had to be a little more cautious. It's usually okay while I'm walking because you're, mushing the blood in and out of the feet. And then once I get into the tent, I have down booties I'm in like instantly. I still don't have gloves that work really well for me, though. I have weirdly large hands. So trying to find one that have the characteristics I want and that actually fit is a challenge. It is also really a challenge trying to figure out how much food to pack for these things. You'd think, after 3 whole seasons of being out, it'd be a piece of cake. But your hunger really changes. People get out for like 2 days and start talking about hiker hunger. And they don't realize it takes weeks and a couple hundred miles for it really to kick in hard. So at the end of a trip, you've been pushing hard, you've got hiker hunger going on, you're eating a lot, unless you get one of those weird periods where you're all of a sudden not as hungry because other things are going on. And then you're back out here, so you've got the memories of when you were last on trail, but you don't need quite that much food, but you don't want to run completely out. Add on to the fact that after 3 years, I have been through phases where I was fine with pretty much all food. I burned out on some things I'm good with again, but I can't do. For example, Norsides, I still can barely smell them, much less eat them after using those pretty heavily on the ECT. The beans and rice, fortunately, seem to be a staple that I don't burn out on, and I have a couple of things like Cliff bars and Nature Valley bars that I can kind of use as a staple, mixed in with the usual trail mix and whatever else looks like I can choke it down. Every now and then I get somebody reaching out saying, oh, they're working on some new backpacker food company, things like that. It'll be all healthy food, you can just eat veggies and things. That would be great. However, you got to remember that stuff, by the time you get it packaged out in stores, tends to be a little expensive. Mountain House's, that style meal is now like $16 per bag. And that adds up really quickly when I'm out, 140, 130, up to 300 days a year. And before somebody asks in the comments, no, nobody wants to sponsor, bearded pudgy white guy number 4,000 out on trail. Actually, I take that back. I did get one offer from some Chinese company to send me some backpacker meal to try, a backpacker meal to try, in exchange for a video, which would have taken me like hours. Yeah. So I'm camped just a couple of tenths of miles back from where I was able to get water last night. It was fairly quiet, can hear the streams, mostly was listening to wind all night, though I did have some animal get caught by a coyote or something not far from my tent. Woke up to screeching. So this is the campsite. I didn't record last night because it was too dark, cold, and windy. I'm always amused by the gut hook far out comments because people post about stuff like this, that it's all slanted and nobody should stay here. Yes, ground is rarely flat. However, as many people on the AT never seem to learn, a little bit of tilt with your head going up is actually preferable, because if it rains, if you're dead flat, you're going to be floating. So my camp was up at around 5,200 feet. So I did gain some significant altitude from when I started, if you wondered why it was so much colder last night. So I camped at around mile marker 37. Jen is going to be at mile marker 56 tomorrow morning at around 7:30, 8 o'clock. So my goal is just to get as close to that as possible. I am almost to the top of the climb to Mount Laguna. So I think that puts the most sustained climb of my section and also the steepest, aka Laguna and Hauser, behind me at this point. Though honestly, with my knee issues, the sustained up is actually really good as long as the trail is clear. Oh wow, I got to camp there. More comments about how it's too sloped, people can't manage. I basically move the fastest when I have slightly upward sloping like this clear trail where I can just put my head down and I have something to fight against. One of the things I'm always highly interested in is the experience of people who have done either the PCT or the AT and then did the other, because I found them to be very different trails with very different challenges, and I kind of needed to adjust a lot of my equipment. Since I did the PCT first, you know, those that switched to the AT, that's one thing. It is interesting, the ones that came from the AT here, I've seen a handful who actually quit just because of the sun exposure. And I get it. I was getting, for the first, I don't know, a couple hundred miles of the AT, people kept asking me what this weird shirt I was wearing was. They thought I was wearing a fleece, because sun hoodie is not as big a thing out there, I guess. And sure enough, I mean, I eventually learned after it got super hot and humid in Pennsylvania that I was better off wearing as little clothing as possible so I would stay dry. If you try and do, you know, run around in your underwear out here like you do in AT, sometimes during rainstorms, you're gonna have a bad time. You are going to be a lobster person. Which, hey, I mean, the internet being what it is, I'm sure that's somebody's fetish and maybe you'll get a whole bunch of followers. I know somebody who does outdoor videos / was a model. And apparently the video that used to have the most hits was something talking about her armpit hair. I do have a fairly involved script for, you know, how the three trails compared for me coming from my background. I am holding off on those until I actually finish the CDT. Because, you know, Triple Crown retrospective sounds a lot better than PCT, the AT plus the ECT, and 2/3 of the CDT. So in 2020, I camped up here in the trees. I was gonna make for this camp, but I figured I really didn't want to be any higher than I had to, considering the temperature. Yeah, this was me in a far warmer 2020. I'm starting to suspect this spigot at that Laguna campground isn't gonna be on right now. Kind of afraid the water's gonna be off and the bathroom's gonna be locked here, but might as well give it a shot. Yeah, sure enough. Not surprised considering how much snow's on the ground. I don't need any of this stuff here. Water lasts a lot longer when it's this cold. But I think for giggles, I might walk through the Laguna store route. There's a visitor center, and if that's open, might be able to top off without having to freeze my filter. Or I could be weak and get a hot lunch. So I haven't had a hot lunch in a couple of days, and it's been really cold. I think a wise man once said, the mind is willing, but the flesh is weak and squishy. That might have been Homer Simpson. And that was not the worst decision I've made this trip. Decent burger, real friendly people. And fortunately the wind is still really bloody cold, so I didn't really miss out on anything. So this is Laguna Mountain Store. First resupply for most people along the trail. And now back down to the deserty desert. Something like a 30-mile downhill to Scissors when you look at it from far enough away. Of course, you zoom in, it's a bunch of little ups and downs. The good news is as you descend every 1,000 feet, you actually gain a couple of degrees, assuming, you know, conditions are the same. You really notice it in the Sierra coming off the east side where you can descend 6,000 feet from a pass down to the trailhead. Currently, I am right under 6,000 feet up here at Laguna, and in about 34 miles or so, Scissors Crossing is the next major low point, and that'll be at 2,200. This would have been fun a couple of days ago. I've been dodging some ice off and on. Every now and then a big one lets go on that tower though. Sounds like rockfall. Okay, last water source I was hoping for was dry. There is supposedly a cistern right up here, which is good because it's getting to that time. I'm still gonna push it on a little ways, both because there's not really good campsites along that road from what I recall, and because I need to get as close as possible to Jen in the morning. That just makes me wish I could keep on going. Only 1,600 some miles to Oregon. California's really too long. Okay, bathrooms were open. Here's hoping the cistern's not frozen now. Well, I guess I can make it work. Okay, filtering when it is literally below freezing and getting dark is not one of my favorite activities. But I got a full load of water. Hopefully my filter's not gonna freeze before I get to camp. That compromises it and you can end up getting Girardi and whatnot. And there is a camp in a couple of miles. I am within range of where Jenna's gonna come in, so I'll probably have her come hike towards me since she'll be a bit warmer and getting moving earlier. Okay, next wind protected spot, I think I'm gonna call it. It's a little after 7 o'clock. It's just less fun hiking here at night. And I eventually found some place that's out of the wind. So I made it to about mile 56, which was my goal. So there's a couple more miles in the morning, or I just have Jen hike here while I drink coffee. Home sweet home for the night.